What's up, everybody, and welcome back to this episode of the podcast. On this episode, we are going to look at, or I'm going to look at, my yearly reflections. Now, to be honest, I have been really putting this off for the last couple of days, in that I've been doing them, redoing them, doing them again, and because I didn't really want to leave anything out. But then I kind of focused and I said, right, I'm going to look at it in a couple of different ways, and I'm going to use the 9 reflection questions that I usually use. But this time I'm going to flip the script and I'm going to use the 9 reflection questions at the end. And I'm going to talk a little bit through, I guess, what are the things that came to mind first for this year. So at least that way I can use the 9 reflection questions then to kind of back that up. But I can give you a better idea of the way the year went initially. And hopefully then it should all tie together and should work out and be a good podcast. There is a lot of takeaways, which is the best thing. Definitely a very interesting year for myself, a really good year. Enjoyed it a lot, and I did enjoy putting together these reflections. So I guess how I'm going to look at it, because there's going to be people here who are going to want to hear a little bit about, I'm sure, the rehab side of things and the injury side of things, and then want to hear a little bit about maybe the places that I've been or the travel that I've been lucky enough to be able to I guess the destinations I've been lucky enough to be able to be at for the last year as well. So I want to try encapsulate all of that in this podcast. So buckle up, we're going to talk straight into it. Okay, so I guess looking at the year that's gone by, I have been in a couple of different places, and I was living in Brazil for the first probably 5.5 months of the year. Then I was back in Ireland, and I was in London just for a short time. And then I was in Saudi Arabia as well. Now, all for different reasons, but I was only in London for a very short time, for like a day. I dropped in, I went over there it was actually to organise for Saudi, because we were going over to a wedding in Saudi. So I don't really count it as a place that I had been for too long. But I was lucky to be able to get over there and see a different side, a side of the city called Green Street, which I don't know if many of you have been there before, but you could say it's kind of the Southeast Asian, Middle Eastern aspect of London, from my understanding anyway. And it was definitely an experience to go there, to go into an English city and see this side of the city, and see that there was a complete expat population living in one specific area, and all the cultures of that expat population, I guess, developing within that area as well. Which I guess is kind of what I do when I go to other places, is I go to the area, and I am an expat in those countries. So expat's a funny word, immigrants, let's just say, in one of those countries, and you're trying to find yourself within that culture, but you're also at the same time trying to find aspects of that culture that are familiar, things that you can fit into, and things that are not so different to home as well, because it is nice to have that routine, and it's also nice to have that new side to the culture as well. So I'm going to jump forward and back here, because I want to talk about my trip to Saudi, because it does kind of back up my time in Brazil as well, in a different way. In terms of the two countries are very different. You could say they're opposing sides of a scale when you look at liberalism versus conservatism in a lot of ways. And Saudi is a really culturally interesting place. Now, I only got to see a small part of the country, and the culture, you can see that it's obviously an older culture. There's a real emphasis on religion within the culture. I would say it's more conservative. Really nice people, like absolutely great people out there. The routine, the practice, the food, everything around it makes the society and the people that you meet are generally, the ones that I had met anyway, out there, very happy and welcoming. And then there's obviously the other side of it as well, where if you come from a Western country, it's so different to your culture of what you are used to seeing, that it kind of can be a little bit scary. And I guess some people feel that it can attack your values in a lot of ways. And if I said to anyone I was in Saudi, and we also obviously talk about the conservative aspect of it and the religious aspect of it, the first thing people look at is obviously the one that sticks out the most is probably women's rights, in that, like, do women have the same rights as they do in the West? I can't say, because I didn't spend long enough there to get an understanding of that. But it was interesting to be put into that kind of scenario and look at how a country that's obviously fully developed country, but they are developing and they are changing and they are trying to improve their ways. And you can see that the conservative aspect is tending more towards a liberal aspect now, in that they're trying to introduce more tourism, and you see that with all the boxing that's on there, the fact that Ronaldo's playing over there, and they're kind of starting up their own Premier League. Well, they have their own Premier League, but they're looking to build it, and they're also looking to get a World Cup there pretty soon as well. So they're trying to integrate that aspect more. And speaking to people who are from there, you can see that the grip of maybe the Islamic law that was there before, it's tending to loosen a small bit. And I don't mean that with a negative connotation at all. I just mean that there's this Islamic law in place, and you can see that it's there in a day-to-day, but there's a lot of rules that aren't followed, let's say, which is, I guess, is important for any country who's looking to introduce more aspects of tourism, that they probably need to change up a few of their ways. Every country has done it. So it'd be interesting to look at how that does develop over the next couple of years. Now, would I live there in Saudi? I probably wouldn't live there long term, but I definitely would go back. I thought it was a very interesting society, culture to see. And I feel that there probably are certain restrictions in place right now that will impact it from a tourism aspect and from a Westerner moving in aspect point of view. But at the same time, they probably don't care too much for that, because they're not looking for people like me to move in there as much. It is, I guess, some of the restrictions that are there, I can't speak for the people who live there all the time, but speaking to a young guy who I had met out there, from his perspective and from my perspective, I guess, after chatting to him, it looks like some of the restrictions of what were actually real, what are restrictions on the outside versus what they have to say are a restriction versus what's actually in place, and how the young people grow up and how they live their lives, and the laws that they follow and the rules that they follow, a little bit different, and I would say very similar to any other country that I've been to anywhere in the world. And that was one guy who was able to explain that in more detail to me, that, like, let's say a simple thing about alcohol. Alcohol is not available in the country at all. It's very hard to see. I think there's one bar in the embassy, one of the embassies in the area, that you can go to, but otherwise it's obviously illegal to have alcohol in the country. But speaking to this young guy, he was basically saying to me that the majority of younger people who are going out to night bars and going out to those places where they're socializing, maybe not the majority, but there's a good portion of them that are drinking alcohol before they go out, and then when they go out, obviously you don't have access to it as much. That was something that I was like, okay, like any country in the world, you have the rules that are in place, you have the outside image of what it's like, and then you have what it's actually like on the ground living there. So if that's the case, maybe in future things can change a bit more, but they have to kind of keep it, because it is in a way the home of Islam. Now, any Muslim who's listened to this, I don't mean that in, like, as I say, I don't know if that's right or wrong, or if I'm saying that wrong, but from my understanding, that was kind of a big thing that was pushed, that Mecca is there as well. It seems like in time, if they're going to continue with the tourism aspect, that they might actually look to change that, the laws on alcohol, and the different laws that may be a bit more restricting to people. I was out there, my mother was there, my sisters were there, they had no issues at all. They were still able to go out, wear what they want. It's respectful to cover the shoulders and to cover down to your knees. That's just respect. In any country, you're going to follow the rules that they have. So that was an interesting one as well. Otherwise, it's hugely popular for Muslims, and you can see it's completely catered for that as well. Mecca is actually one of the top 10 tourist cities in the world, which is interesting to think about in terms of the amount of people that come there specifically for the pilgrimage, which the name is after going from me right now. But yeah, so it's obviously booming that way. It's growing fast, and as I said, it's beautiful architecture and really great people there. It'd be interesting to see how that develops over the next 10 to 15 years. I might come back to this and check it again. So I guess moving on to a place that I spent a bit more time in this year. That is Brazil, the country of Brazil. Now, I have to say, after leaving Brazil, Brazil holds a special place in my heart at the moment. It gave me the opportunity to learn a new language, and to be honest, learning Portuguese is a huge challenge. it's something that I'm a little bit more confident at now. I could probably, if I was thrown in the middle of Brazil, I'd probably figure my way around. I kind of had to do that because English isn't as widely spoken as you would expect as it can be in other countries, even though like my friends, the ones who I hung out with there, they all spoke English to a pretty good standard. And now obviously when you're with their friends, then it changes a little bit. But so that was really, really good. I love that. And it was nice to be in a culture who they like. Brazil have kept their culture in a way, in that like they have, how would you describe it? The fact that you don't speak English as much, and not that many people speak English, is really good because it becomes less westernized like really quickly. So they still hold a lot of things, and they still have an energy for life that I haven't really seen in other countries. If you go to the beach, if you go to the bars, if you go to any type of a social setting, whether it's a samba or if you're going to some type of musical event, there's this different energy that it's very hard to find in other places. And I think that's why people can fall in love with Brazil in a lot of ways, because if you can just take a little bit of that energy, the people there are great as well. It's a place that I guess I learned a lot over the 6 months that I was there. Completely different because I was in Argentina the year before, and then I went from Argentina straight to Brazil. So I had gone from Spanish to Portuguese. I honestly had thought that Spanish is closer to Portuguese than it actually is. And the more Portuguese you learn, the more you realise that it's not that similar at all. But there is certain words that can get you by. So at the start, the Spanish did get me by, but I had to start learning Portuguese to kind of dive into the culture more anyway. But in Brazil, I was lucky to get to a couple of places. I was in Floripa, Florianopolis, let's say it's in the south. I was in Rio, and we got inland as well for a couple of days also. So I saw a couple of different places, but I think I have to go back there again to check it out. Now Rio, I was there for New Year's. Spectacular city. It's one of the cities in the world I would recommend absolutely anyone to go to. It obviously has its downsides. There's a dangerous element to the city, and it's funny that I say that because there isn't too many people in the world or from Brazil, let's say, that you talk to, that you mention Rio, that they don't say that within the next two sentences after it, that like it's a beautiful city and then it's also a dangerous city. People are always reminded of that, but there is a very good reason that it's one of the 7 wonders of the world. When you go to Rio Harbour and you see it, and you're just going around the city and you just look at how it is, I guess it's a city within this state of mountains. It's unbelievable. It's hard to describe, but I'm looking forward to come back there again. Really cool energy. As I said, I got to see a cool side of the city. I was with friends who were from there, so they were able to show me around, keep me safe as well at the same time. But I think I want to go back and spend a bit more time in Rio and get a better understanding of it. Also, I got to experience Carnival. That was a cool thing as well. So I went to Floripa. Floripa is a section, very unique section in the bottom of Brazil. Really cool people. It's like a safe haven in Brazil. People say that it is the safest part of Brazil because it's like an island. There's only one bridge going in and out to the island. And supposedly that's one of the reasons, because of the bottleneck, that the crime rate is so low there compared to other places. Like the crime rate in let's say Rio is probably top 2 in South America. And I think if you actually look at the city of Floripa, it's like 21 or 22. So it is still obviously up there, but that's within the city. But I spent all my time in the island of Floripa. Now, I would say that the island of Floripa is, they call it the island of magic, Ilha Mágica, I think it is. But it's very, how would you say, it's like the Bali, I would say, of South America, of the places that I've been in South America, in that it's probably a little bit more spread out. You do need access to a car or a bike anyway, which I didn't have either, so I was just using Uber or walking everywhere. One way to get your steps up. But the people out there that you meet on the island are something else. Like, such nice people. The Brazilians, I can't speak enough for them. They are the most welcoming people that you will meet, and always looking to have a good time. So they really took care of me when I was out there. I have to say, they really did. You have to respect it, because it's when you have foreigners coming over and taking people in and showing them around, there's a lot to be said there, and it tells a lot about the people as well. So good shout out to Tina, Max, Sue, Gabby and Sibeli. thank you so much for everything that you did. Max, actually, as well, one of the guys I met out there, is the guy that I was able to get to create a documentary with, which I haven't talked about too much yet, but I will talk about it soon. We're kind of keeping it on the down low because we want to make sure that it's finished. It's going to be out soon. As I said, I really think it's going to change the course of how we look at injuries in professional sports, because we took a lot of time to put this together. And obviously it's a massive claim, but what else are you going to be doing? Obviously, you have to make these type of claims because it is. When you see it, I hope that it'll completely change your perspective on athletes, the injuries that they get, why they spend so long out versus why some of them are getting injured every couple of weeks, why other ones aren't getting injured every couple of weeks. And it's about a pretty big case that happens soon. So I'm looking forward to getting that out. But I digress. Back to it. These people made my experience in Floripa. It was at a time in my life that I really needed to shift. And it's something I realized that I needed. Because sometimes, and I'll talk about this later, but as crazy as it sounds, I got an ACL tear last November in a jiu-jitsu competition at the end of a year that I was primarily focused on jiu-jitsu. And if you listen to my yearly reflections last year, you can hear me talking about that as well. It does sound a bit crazy, but I do feel that was a bit of a godsend. It kind of happened at the right time. I was off the back of that. I had moved to Argentina, and I'll talk about that in the previous podcast, where I was basically, when I look at it now as in the year gone by, I was basically channeling a certain amount of emotional energy based off of the year I had before that into a sport, and it really locked me into the sport. Now, it was good because you develop so much faster, but I got so tied into it that I needed to kind of break that a small bit. So when the ACL tear came, I obviously couldn't be as focused in on the sport, and I couldn't be training every single day like I was before, which meant that when I went to Brazil, I had more time to try out new things and go to different places. So it was a very, for me in the last year, I kind of realized that, I guess, trying to look back on it, and I could look at it in many ways, I think that was, and you'll hear I say that, a godsend, you'll hear how much of a challenge it was to get through that this year as well, and how much, to be honest, the amount of negative energy that was around it, and the amount of I guess mental struggle that was associated with it as well, trying to overcome that and get back to sport, is a kind of, it's a funny opposition to why I say that. I say the ACL was a godsend, but at the same time, my God, I could have done without it as well. But in one way, it was a godsend because when I went to the island in Brazil, it gave me this new perspective that, okay, I'm not just going to focus on training. I'm not just going to focus on sport. I will come back and look at the social and integrate myself into the culture more and see if I can pick up anything here and see if I can learn more about it. And that was really nice being able to do that. Now, I was so lucky to be put into Floripa. As I said, it was like a safe haven in Brazil. And I never really had any issues there. The island life is good. It's a big island, but it's kind of small in that when you go to the same places, you meet the same people a lot. It's a beach life, full of mountains, full of hikes, full of trails, really good surfing, even though I don't think I ever surfed there properly. But like the World Surf League is there, which is crazy. I don't know how I didn't do it. Just even go out for like a normal day surfing. But I am looking forward to getting back to Brazil next year and maybe dipping in there again and saying hello to everyone. But I was lucky enough when I was there to experience it how I did, and to be able to get that experience and to kind of learn a lot of new things and learn a lot about myself as well. And I was also really lucky that my parents came over and visited me for a couple of weeks when I was there. So we went to inland, we had a look around the countryside, and it was a bit of an escape from the normal. So all in all, extremely very good experience. I could talk about Brazil more, but I don't want to make this podcast too long, so I'm just conscious of that as well. And I might do a different podcast on my time in Brazil, in another one outside of this. So after Brazil, came back to Ireland. I was back with family and friends, and there was obviously an adjustment period of that. I thought an interesting one coming back here again, after being away for nearly 2 years, that how would you say it? It's like you're trying to find your place again of where you fit in. You knew where you were before, but you're coming back as a different person, and you don't want to just fall into old habits because you want to bring this new personality But at the same time, you do have your old friends here. And although change is really good, you still need to connect. And I think that I see this with a lot of people who go traveling, is that they just, when they come back, they say, I just don't know my friends anymore. I can't connect with my friends anymore. And that's always something that I wanted to avoid, because the friends that I have in Ireland are friends that I've had for 20 years. I'm 29 now. There's some of my friends, some of my closest friends here, I've literally been best friends with them since I was 4 years old. So that's not something that I want to do, to go away and become a completely new person and then come back and not have anything in connection with the people that I know. So I am conscious of that when I do come back after going away for a while. And I think that can be challenging for people. I really think it can be challenging for people who go to like Australia and they come back and that adjustment period when they're trying to figure out themselves and trying to figure out where they fit in, and what life should look like now and how this new life is going to develop. And that was a reflection that I had on the year. Was it's a period at the time when I was coming back that you do definitely subdue aspects of yourself that you had when you went away, and then over time, and I'll talk about that in a lesson later on in the podcast, how with time then you allow that to kind of bring itself to the surface again, so you're not subduing it as much anymore and you can kind of express it more. But as I said, if you just come back in with this big right turn into your friends and your family who have been kind of more in a routine, then it can be a bit of a shock to people, and there can be sparks, and you can kind of feel like, Jesus, I don't fit in here anymore. I don't know anyone here anymore. And I see a lot of people losing friends over that, which isn't the nicest thing. And I know a lot of my friends, like people who I've met away, find that, and they find that they're disconnected from the place that they grew up in because they've gone away and they've maybe attached their personality too much to the person that they have become while they're away. But when you do come back, you kind of get shook again in terms of like where your roots are, the type of person that you grew up, and your value structures. So it's nice to look at it from that perspective as well. But when I got back, I was definitely my own worst enemy for a while, because I didn't really get a car sorted in time. And anyone who knows where I live, it's in the middle of the country. The closest shop to me is, and I mean like shop to buy milk or to buy a 7-Up or anything, is like 10k away. So I'm not cycling that in Ireland. I could cycle it, and I probably should have for my knee, which would have helped it, which it comes back to me being my own worst enemy again. But anyway, I didn't get a car sorted in time, and I was kind of borrowing and using other cars, and I had other modes of transport as well, which I won't go into too much detail here in case I caught up on anything. But I think that was definitely a killer, is not having that free access when I was around here, which really did impact me, I think, at the start, because mentally you're just stuck at home all the time. As I said, it's beautiful, there's a lot of nature around, but you kind of get cabin fever as well sometimes when you're in the house all of the time. So that was something that I would like to, if I was coming back again, I would get that car sorted a bit earlier. Another thing, then we organised a tournament for a friend of mine who had passed away a couple of years ago. So it was a 7s tournament. It was really nice. I got a chance to open the pub that I grew up in, and we put through an event there. Very, very nice. Enjoyed it, and had a job, to be honest, to do with rehabbing my knee, and hoping that I could help out our local football team, which is the Michael Cusicks, hoping that we could try get promoted again, because we had got relegated the year that a friend of mine, the year that Rowan passed away. So it was kind of a goal of mine that if I was able to get back, that we could try help him to push on and to try get back to where we were at. Which leads me on to the ACL injury and my talk about the ACL injury. It's probably something that I never mentioned on Instagram, and there's a reason that I didn't mention it too much on Instagram. First off, I don't like to talk about my own injuries too much. A couple of reasons. I just don't need it forefront of the mind all the time, and it can kind of take away from me actually talking about it and me doing something about it. Funny that I say that, considering what I'm going to talk about and the fact that I didn't do enough about it anyway in the background. So, the ACL, I tore my ACL in a competition in November last year in Argentina. I moved to Brazil 2 weeks later, and in the week before I moved, I got a consultation with a friend of mine who was an orthopedic surgeon over there, who was able to check it out, had a look at it, and had advised me on the options. And obviously surgery was was the number one option for it. But after I tore it, I had done this before, I looked into a lot of the research around what do ACLs heal and what's the time frame that you need to look at and all of this stuff. So it happened in a way that I didn't have the opportunity to get the surgery because I was flying out the next week after I'd met him. And I was in Brazil for so long, I probably wasn't going to get it in Brazil because I didn't really know anyone there. So I was going to have to rehab it. And then when I was getting back to Ireland, it was in the middle of the season. So there was probably no point in me getting it operated on because I knew I'd be out for the whole year then. So that was my thinking. And I just said that, okay, people have done it before, that they have non-operatively got back to play. How would that look like if I did it? And that was kind of the question that I asked myself. Now, let me talk a little bit about what did work well for the knee. Because this was, when I look back on the year, one of the heaviest reflections, and I will talk through the questions after, but this is something that I think people can probably take a lot from, because coming from a background as a physio, this was a challenge for me. Now, I have to say that there was, coming back from the ACL injury, there was a lot of mental battles that not many saw. Now, people, my close friends probably did see them, but when I was trying to come back and push for a spot on the team, like, there was a lot of mental struggles. There was physical, obviously, but the mental struggles were the ones that really weighed, I feel, over the year. And I'd safely say that if we trained 2 to 3 times per week, I would say 2/3 of those, I was coming out frustrated, angry, in pain, and properly defeated. So I would say that 60 to 70% of my week, I was really feeling this way. Frustrated, angry, in a lot of pain and defeated. And I'd say between June, July and August, I would have nearly accepted defeat 4 of 7 days of the week. Which is absolutely crazy to think about it. Because of how much of an impact that can have on your life and on your well-being. And the fact that you're carrying this injury, you're trying to get back in, you're getting injured again, and to go into the details of it, if we would train on a Tuesday night, okay, I would get through the training, and then in the last 5 minutes of the training, my knee would slip out of place, or something would happen, and I'd be going good, I'd be controlling the tempo, and then it would be doing something, it'd be like something small, a lad would kick a ball to me, I'd get it, I'd go to punt it, and my whole knee would shift in and out of place. And the pain of that was killer. But what I would do then is that for the next 3 days, I'd be walking with a limp. I'd have a load of pain in it, be really sharp feeling, and the knee itself would feel loose. So it'd feel like I could literally pop it in and out of place if I wanted to. But the only problem was, come Friday, it would start to have a bit more movement. Then we'd train Friday night. And the same thing would happen again. And it was so consistent because I was a bit of a whore for the rehab. I should have been more strict with the actual rehab I was doing. I was doing it in Brazil, but I wasn't as strategic with what I was doing. I was kind of pissed off, and I was just going and doing the gym sessions, doing a bit of jiu-jitsu, doing a bit of boxing. Didn't do as much running. I kind of started it at the end, started doing a bit more skipping. But now coming out of it, I have to say I have a way better idea of how to approach it and how I would approach it if I, touch wood, was to do it again, or if I had to help someone else through it. Now, we then, as I said, we train Friday to be out again. Then next week, because we train 2 days 1 week, we'd have to train 3 days the next week. So I never really got a break from it. And I remember a time in probably late July, August, before championship had started, that I was just said, right, it wasn't worth it. I was getting injured every training. I couldn't see myself getting back. I didn't see the point of being here because I was just basically, I felt like I was just becoming a hermit. I felt like the training itself was having too much of an impact on my mental health and trying to get back. And I just said, okay, I'm going to pack it in. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to the next place because I didn't feel like it was worth it. I felt like every time, I guess that's the easiest way. I felt like it wasn't worth it because every time I was getting back, I was getting injured and not re-injuring it. That's probably the wrong word to use, but I was aggravating it and I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I couldn't see me getting back. But every time that I thought to myself I was going to go away and pack it in and go to a new place in, let's say, July, August, this kind of voice, it felt like that I was running away if I did that. And it felt like I'd be letting the people down, or the guys down, or the boys down on the team. And I'd be letting myself down as well, in that you couldn't do it. Like, you had all this, you did all the research looked up. You said you could do it. And in the middle of the season, right before championship is coming up, you're going to pull out and you're going to drop out. And I believe if I hadn't put in years, and this is being honest, if I hadn't put in years of boxing before and jiu-jitsu, where we had trained pain management and we had trained like discipline and all these other things, I don't know if I would have been able to keep it up. And I don't know how things would really have went in that case. But then what was happening to me is I was going through my training sessions. It's Gaelic football. I was going through my training sessions. I was feeling really good, and then I wouldn't pull out in time. So because I wouldn't pull out, because I was feeling good, and obviously I hit my tolerance, I wouldn't pull out. The knee would get a jerk in it, and then I'd be missing if I got a really bad jerk, I could be missing for 10 days or 2 weeks that I'd be on the sideline. And then I'd come back and my calf would lock up. And my load management plan really wasn't that good. So you can see that, like, if you're doing this and you're failing 70% of the week for that long a period, 2 months at a time. Now, I was getting better and I was getting smarter about it, but if you're failing for that long, you can really see how, like, at a certain point, it really doesn't feel worth it. You know, it doesn't feel worth it. And I don't really have any other out. What's the word for it? Like, I don't really have another out, like, around where I live at the time. It's just football and to the gym. So when I look back on it, I probably threw myself into a deep end that I really had to figure out how to swim through. And I didn't follow up enough with the rehab in the gym because I didn't give myself a car to bring me to the gym. So you can see how it adds together. But I relied too much, I think, at this time on mental toughness and resilience. I really did. Like, there's no two ways about it. And I did have a lot of battles to overcome because of that. Now, all the negative aside, the fact that I was getting injured, or not injured, I was jerking the knee, I was flaring it up, it's causing me problems, as I said, 60-70% of the week, coming through the week, the mental struggle, the mental battles that I had to overcome to get through that. Let's look at what worked well a little bit. So, one of the things I think that kept me there the whole time was this goal that I had said to one of my close friends at the start when I came back. And I had said to him that I'm going to start the quarterfinal of the championship. That was my goal. I said I'm absolutely going to start it, nothing else. And what that allowed me to do, setting that goal, it actually allowed me to make all these mistakes up to a certain point. And I can remember up to about 2 weeks before it, 3 weeks before it, luckily we got there, but about 2 or 3 weeks before it, I started saying, okay, shit, like, I need to be smart here about this. I might have one challenge game before this that I can get a run out in. And it gave me a window to work within. Now, I didn't get any start during the year for any game. And the thing was that we had a challenge game, or there was there was group games that was coming on. I was playing like 10 or 15 minutes, just getting a run around. But then I started to really up my intensity within training as well. So even though I was picking up these like niggles and these jerks and stuff like that, I was still kind of saying to myself, well, the goal is a quarterfinal. It's okay to pick them up now. I'm going to be good by then. Because the other thing is that I said re-injuring it. It's probably not re-injuring it as much as it is jerking it caused it to flare up pretty severely. Now, there was definitely a couple of times that I did re-injure it where I was out for 10 days and 2 weeks at a time. But I was getting smarter as the season was going on with how I was doing it, with how I was training, when to pull out, when to put the ego aside, what to do in the warm-up before training, what to do in the gym sessions the week of training, how to manage my energy so that within a training session, I knew that, okay, we were going to do these certain drills. This was a drill that I had to perform the best in if I wanted to have a good shot of being in the team, and I could kind of mess and relax on these drills. So I started becoming really tactical about it. And as I said, it was kind of looking a bit grim. I never got a start during the year from league, championship, or any challenge match. And we had a challenge match 2 weeks before the quarterfinal, and I got out and I played one half of it. And then literally on the morning of the quarterfinal, I got a text from the manager. I was making my banana on toast with a bit of honey. And he said, will you play cornerback today? And I said, absolutely. To be honest, it's a position that I must say I've played about 3 times in my life before. And I was thinking it's probably a little bit of a responsibility to be throwing me in cornerback. But I'll figure it out. At least I was getting put in a position that I'd be able to play. Anyone that knows cornerback, it's probably one of the ones that you have the most acceleration and deceleration. There's not much jogging around. It's either you go sprint for a ball or you don't sprint for a ball, which was good to learn. So I had to get used to it quick. But anyway, I was so focused on the morning. I went through warm-up drills with my brother, went through different needs exercises, and then I went down to the game. Now, you literally could not write it if you wanted to. So as I said, I hadn't started a game all year. And the day that we went down playing, it was, the sun was absolutely splitting the rocks, as they say. Beautiful day. And my first time playing 60 minutes in almost 2 years with the knee and recovering, and I was trying to be smart about it. And the fucking game goes to extra time. So I ended up playing 80 minutes on a hot day for the first game back. But I got through the full 80 minutes. And after that, it gave me the confidence to push on for the rest of the year. It was a real standing point to say that, well, if I can last 80 minutes in a game here on a hot day, I'm going to be able to last any game throughout the year. Which people underestimate the impact of these little confidence boosters and how you reflect on these confidence boosters and how much of an impact I can have on you later in the year. And that was a big one for me. It was like, okay, I had no confidence in the knee. Then I did have a little bit of confidence, and then I was kind of getting back in playing these 20-minute halves for games, and then I finally get the start, and I get through the whole game. I was grand in the whole game, got through extra time, was grand in extra time. So afterwards I was like, okay, I'm good. I'm going to be 100% now for the rest of the season after that. And I have to say, the season went well. We ended up actually winning the championship, which was good, even though I had to stay in cornerback for every game throughout the championship. So if managers listen to this, I hope I don't ever have to go on cornerback again, because it's not that much crack, if I'm honest, for a fella who's used to playing wing back or wing forward. But anyway, I should say, little thing, my goal was every game I kind of had a strict goal of how I was going to test my performance, and it was literally just to keep the guy scoreless. No turnovers, keep the guy scoreless. If I could do that, I'd be happy out. To be honest, I was lucky enough that I was able to get through the championship and through the Munster campaign with no scores. So that's my little cheeky stat there at the end, just to poke the ego a small bit. But much of that has to honestly do with the guys around me who kept me safe, who knew I was in a position that I could be compromised, and they did a lot of work for me as well. And I was lucky to have a manager to put up with all my shit as well, because like if you're a manager and you're looking at a lad trying to come back and he's stopping training and he's pulling out and he's missing training for a week at a time, it can be a bit of a challenge, I imagine, to keep giving him a chance. So I do appreciate that. And obviously the team of lads as well who always believe in you. For those of you who are listening, actually, this was an interesting point I felt. If you're on a team, don't underestimate the impact of telling someone on your team who could be struggling with something at the time, injury wise especially, little things. Like, I remember a guy saying to me when I was having trouble, he was on the team, he was one of the older players, and he said, geez, you've come on a lot in the last few weeks. I can see that you're moving a lot better right now. And I remember that specific point really gave me like a new lease of life. It was the right compliment in the right place at the right time. And it gave me such a boost of energy. So anyone who's listening to this, if you do see someone who is struggling or who is going through their injury and they're trying to get back, do not underestimate the impact of a little compliment. If you know they're working on something and saying, geez, you are doing better there. I can see you're moving better. I can see, like, you can see the change in you. Because it might just be all they need to lift them up and to keep them going. And in that case, it really did actually make a difference to me anyway. Just because it was like, I'm not the only one here who's feeling that I'm doing better. I'm not the only one who's trying to keep a positive outlook. So that was one to touch on. It was a nice one to look back on, because it did make a big difference. I guess the next one then, I will do a full podcast on this, on the ACL specifically. What would I have done differently? I think load management strategy would be absolutely key. I think it'd be crazy to go down. I was doing it in my head, knowing what my load was, knowing, okay, I pushed here. But the problem with doing it in your head is that you can easily break those barriers if you say, well, I'm actually feeling much better tonight than I was the last night, and you stay going. So a load management strategy in place before would have been really key. Having an objective measure in mind is also important. So knowing that, okay, I did 35 minutes the last day, I'm going to look to do 40 minutes this day, and I'm going to do a few runs at the end myself. That would have been a good one as well. Same idea of having that load management strategy in place. You just don't let the subjective take over, because if you let the subjective take over and you're a competitive person, the ego comes into place and you continue pushing, and then you get set back by 10 days because you did too much. Many struggle with the subjective, there's no question, and a lot of people there, you could say their mind gives up too early due to pain, and that can be a problem. But the other side can be a problem as well, that if you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, which doesn't generally happen to people, but if you do, and then the pain gets worse as well. So you kind of need to find a nice balance there and understand what's the right amount for you. My only goal was to get back to the team for the quarterfinal, so I was willing to put up with the pain and all the warning signs to the point that I probably would have been better to pull back. But I did become much more aware of it throughout the season and as I went on. And as I began to pull out and just go into the gym instead as the trainings went on. So I got better at understanding that of what I needed to do in the gym to help me perform in training and matches. I absolutely dialed this in at the end of the season, and I can talk through this in another podcast. I can go through exactly the system that I use. If anyone thinks that it's going to help them, you can send me a message on Instagram as well, and I can talk you through it. So I will put that all in another podcast as well, just to make sure that it gets covered in more detail, because I think there's a lot to be learned from that. Another thing that I learned, and it was actually a friend of mine who said this to me, and you'd be surprised how you think that this should be a thing that's top of mind, is as you get older and the more injuries that you get, it does take a little bit of time to warm up faster. Okay, now there is a load management element to this, and a tolerance and conditioning, and you can condition yourself to warm up faster by getting yourself in faster, but you're also playing on the side of risk by doing that. And I did that at one time in the season. So a friend of mine said to me, he's a close friend, I had him on this podcast before, he's an excellent coach, Brian McInerney. He said to me, you need to be smart about your warm-up. And he said, take the extra time. He said, if your training starts at 7:30, you should be out on the pitch at 7 o'clock, just taking your time and easing yourself into it. And he was 100% right in that. And I do thank you for that, Brian, because that was a big point that helped me progress this season as well. It is something that you expect and something that you think that, okay, everyone knows that. But what I was doing is I was going down maybe 10 minutes before doing my own warm-up, and then I was jumping in the team warm-up and thinking that the team warm-up was enough for me. But it wasn't. The issue had gotten to the point that I was deconditioned, and I was obviously the neurological side of it wasn't where it used to be. So if I didn't warm up, I was picking up little injuries earlier in training, or little issues earlier in training, and it was impacting my ability to train. I was stopping and starting, and I wasn't getting full sessions in. So after he said that, I started going down like 20 minutes, 25 minutes before training, doing the lightest stuff, walking up and down, jogging up and down the pitch and building that up. When I was at home, I was doing all my own stuff like single leg RDLs, light hops, jumping single leg forward and back, doing all this different stuff. And that was a key to actually get me back to start training way more. So if you do have injuries, if you are picking up issues and you're getting back, don't underestimate the effect of the warm-up. Now, there was a couple of training sessions, because I'd actually love to make a podcast on this specifically about the adaptation side of the body. There was certain training sessions closer to, let's say, this was risky now. I remember doing this, but this was so risky. But I said, fuck it, I'm going to try it. It was really close to like bigger games. So we're probably in the group game and championship. And what I did is I went down and I did like a 5 or 10 minute warm up, and I jumped into the actual warm up of the training session, and without doing a proper one, knowing that I was at high risk. And lo and behold, was going through it and got this kind of a jerk in my knee in the middle of the training session, or in the warm up in the training session, and I had to come back to the side. And because I got that jerk in my knee, I knew that, okay, I'm not going to be able to do the rest of this training session. But I was still able to do running, and I was still able to do my own rehab on the side. So I went over to the side and I did my own rehab. But that meant, in my head, and this is the way adaptation works, technically, that I should be able to warm up faster with less exercise in the next session because of the fact that I had pushed the tolerance of it. It wasn't a really bad jerk. I was obviously able to stay training and kicking ball and do my own bit over to the side. But because what I tried to do is jump the gun a small bit. Now, this might not make sense to you if you're listening to this right now, but you're always trying to overreach. When you're looking at stress and adaptation in the system, if you're trying to improve the body, you have to overreach. That's why you push your body in the gym to do weights that you may not be able to do one week. You push it a bit more and then you are able to do them in a week or two's time. And what I tried to do is I tried to jump that. So I took that risk. It didn't pay off exactly there, but I felt that it paid off because I had a better confidence then in every training session after that, because I knew that, okay, well, if I do, if I'm completely stuck for time, I only need about 10 minutes to warm up now. And then literally every training session after that, I still did my 25-minute warm up. Now, that might not make sense to you right now, okay? But it's applying the stress and adaptation system, and the idea of what I'm looking at there is more of a neurological warm-up, because I jumped the gun, I overreached, I pulled back, I gave it a chance to adapt, and then as I went into it then, if I was, let's say, going with the boys, and we were going down to the pitch and we were going kicking ball around, I didn't need to do a 25-minute warm-up after that, okay? Because I was able to start, I was trying to adjust my ability to warm up. And I think when you get injuries, you do need to take a longer time to warm up because of the injury that's there. And over time, then you can start to shorten that. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, write to me on Instagram and I'll try to help you out with that a bit more. But that's a cheeky one. High risk. That's a really high risk one. So I don't actually say to everyone to apply that, even though I just put it out in the podcast. I wouldn't say everyone apply it though. Be smart. So people ask me, why did I do it that way? Why did I not get the surgery? And why did I try to go back into training? Say it all the time to me. To be honest, why not? Honestly, like, first off, I'm a physio who works with people who have injuries. Why not at least put myself through the practice to try to figure it out? I have an inherent belief that if the body is put in the right situation, with the right strategy and the right tactics, it can heal almost anything. And I'm optimistic and I'm positive about that, and I know a lot more about that now. Time, consistency and effort is all it really needs, in my belief. And there was a timing thing too. If I had gotten the surgery, I would have missed the season anyway. So why get surgery? It all played out pretty good in the end. Think of someone as well, as I said, in my position and what I could learn from it and how I can help others now understanding that and knowing it better. Now, no, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, to be honest. I wouldn't wish that kind of a season on anyone, because at a certain point of the season, I actually did not like football anymore. I remember thinking this, and I grew up playing football because it was so much of a challenge to try get down there, get the training, push for a spot in the team while you're still trying to rehab the knee. I'll be honest, that was not a nice thing to do. It really wasn't, but I feel that I learned a lot from it. So to come back to my original answer, why'd you do it? Why not? Why not try these things in it yourself? I don't know why not. Okay, to be honest, they're the main things that I wanted to chat about in the yearly reflections. Now I have the reflection questions of what I talked about at the start. I'll do these a little bit shorter because I think a lot of the stuff that I covered there, I covered it already, and this will just be like an addition to it. So question 1, and anyone can take these questions and apply them to their own life as well. Question 1, what made you feel most happy this year? I think you have to look at this one personally, professionally, physically, and then you can look at it overall. It can be big things or small things. You can look at it from a daily, weekly, monthly, or you can look at main events. I think that one big one, even though at the time I was launching the back pain course, my parents coming over to Brazil was actually really nice, because it was a break from the normal, and I had been away for over a year and a bit, year and a half or something like that before they had come. So that was a nice one. That was one big event, let's say. I just think personally, family and friends, being around family, being around friends, spending time actually training, even though I say that it was also one of the biggest causes of unhappiness this year for me, training and trying to get through that. It was actually one of the biggest, I guess, things that made me feel the most happy as well. Training in the gym especially was good. Doing a bit of jiu-jitsu, getting back and doing boxing. I probably didn't mention that in Brazil as much as I actually got back boxing training, until I stepped wrong and my knee completely slipped out of place, and then I stopped for a while and I just didn't get the chance to go back after that. So it was nice getting back into that. Being around animals at home was nice, and then getting to my brother's wedding was lovely as well. I should also say, doing Elevate Fit Fest was a very enjoyable experience for me, because I loved being down there. Really cool people. I'll hopefully do it again next year, and a lot of people showed up as well, which I was unexpected, just because I hadn't promoted it or anything. So it was great to see people, chat to people, and thank you if you are listening to this for coming to that. I do appreciate it. So that was nice, and I suppose that ties into the professional, but to be honest, I love what I do, so that's a personal one as well. Professionally then, all the standard things, just I guess having your own schedule and working when I want was a big one when I look back on the year. Having a clear direction on where I want to go, and I do have to thank Brian Keane for that. He gave me a lot of direction. He helped me out a lot this year in the direct of where I wanted to go, what I wanted to work towards. And I think another huge one professionally and personally is I learned a lot this year about mindset and stories, and the story you tell yourself, and helping people to change their mindset to get back into an active life and to start developing their skills and their strength. That was one as well. Physically, I think proving to myself was a big one, that I actually could get back into playing football without the ACL surgery, even though when I had spoken to orthopedic surgeons outside of that, and people around me, this was another big one as well, actually, now that I think about it, is that I remember having a conversation with people at an event who had tore their ACL, and their brothers had tore it, and they all told me that you couldn't do it and it was a waste of time. And they, like, obviously that was literally speaking from their own experience, which I will talk about in time, but on reflection, this was really big. Being able to get back playing without getting the surgery was a nice one for me. But yeah, I'll talk about that in a second, about people actually telling me that I couldn't do it because they couldn't do it, their brothers couldn't do it, their cousin tried it and they couldn't do it, their cousin tried it and they didn't do the rehab right, and they actually got the surgery and they still, like, it didn't work for them, and all of this different stuff. Yeah, I'll talk about it in a second. Question number 2, what made you unhappy this year? I think the obvious ones, really, when you look at it, the most obvious is my grandmother passed away at a very interesting time. The day that I flew to Saudi Arabia for my brother's wedding, my grandmother passed away literally that day, which was a sad event, but at the same time, she was 97 years old. She lived on her own terms. She lived a great life, and she was actually the first person that I ever did a podcast with, which is funny. I haven't posted it, but it is my first podcast ever. So I hopefully get that all figured out and get the sound and all of that done, but at least they have something there. She lived a great life, so it was obviously an unhappy thing, but at the same time, it couldn't have happened at a better time for her, let's say. The other one then I think is, like, obviously they're all minor in comparison to that, but just trying to get back into training and feeling not able to do it, doubt about if I would be able to do it, if that was actually something that was possible. They were the kind of big ones, really, that made me most unhappy this year. And obviously the mental struggles associated with it. What were the biggest lesson? Question number 3. What was the biggest lesson you learned this past year? This is all about, like, revelations, something that happened to you or someone around you. How did it change you? Why? Was it positive or negative? I think one of the big ones, a lesson that I learned, is this ties back to the people who were telling me that it wouldn't be possible to get back with the ACL, is that people often cast their experience onto you and they don't realize it, and they're not meaning to do it, but they can push it, especially within conversation, they can push it to protect their own belief about themselves and to believe their own story. And I imagine that I do it too, to people. I know I do it in ways as well, especially talking about working online and doing that stuff. I know that it doesn't suit everyone, and I definitely have to try catch myself sometimes when I'm talking about it. If someone asks me about it, if they're interested in it, that I'm very enthusiastic about it, when sometimes I probably shouldn't be as much and I should be more on their level. But I think in this case, it's about I just not judging them. Try not to judge these people too much when it happens, when they're trying to put their experience on you, and just being aware that sometimes they are protecting themselves, and it's not to go against you, even though they might fight tooth and nail about why they're right, you're wrong. But it's to protect themselves and protect their beliefs and protect the story. that they tell themselves, because the story that they tell themselves make up the character of the person who they are. And if you are going to radically change that story, they also have to radically change, and they're going to believe it. They have to radically change their character as well, which is a huge challenge for a lot of people. I think that's one. Certain phases, I think, is another lesson. They just take time to pass. And you just use that time to your advantage. Ask a question and let it work itself. Just ask, if you have anything that you are unsure about what you want to do right now, just ask yourself the question and give it time then to settle in. Let the subconscious work on it and let it come out, and watch how it comes out into play and into your life. I think that was a nice one. And that just takes time. There's no fast tracking that at all. To come back to the one about the guys and the story, I think it's another one that stuck out to me is changing your story is actually key to long-term growth. And this comes from off the back of people who I was working with chronic injuries and issues and problems like back pains, knee pains. Let's say they have chronic illnesses as well. This comes off the back of that, where it's really about the conversations that you have with yourself are so important, and they are key to growth, key to long-term growth, because you will keep repeating the story to yourself and to other people around you. And be aware of the language that you use, because the more people that you tell your story, the more ingrained it'll actually start to become within yourself. Just a really small example of that is that in the middle of the summer I was getting back, and I was obviously going through this phase that it was this challenge for me and thing, that obstacle that I just was not able to overcome. And one day I was just in the kitchen and I was saying it. It's actually my father had pointed it out. He said, how do you expect to get over this if it's all you're thinking about and all you're talking about? And it was hilarious, because anyone who follows me on Instagram, anyone who follows me on the podcast, knows that is something that I say to people all of the time. About if you're always thinking about it and always talking about it, it's going to always be forefront of your mind, and any tiny change in it, you're going to pick up on it. And it's something I knew myself, but I guess sometimes you do need someone else to highlight it. It was becoming a crutch for me. It was something that I was leaning on. And although at the time I was really pissed off when he said it, because I had all the reasons of, well, it's ligament in the knee is gone and the knee is unstable and all this, and I don't even know if it is healed yet and all this. I was saying that stuff to kind of protect my ego, protect myself, and protect the language that I was using. And I did know that there was truth in what he was saying though. So I had to acknowledge the truth, and I had to suck it up, and I had to change my perspective. I was focusing on it too much and how it was hindering me and what I couldn't do and all the reasons why I couldn't do these things. But then from then on, I just started to change how I spoke about it. Someone had asked me, how's your knee? I'd say it's feeling much better now. It's actually feeling stronger. I have a lot more movement in it. It's a lot more stable. Now if somebody asked me, remember someone recently said to me about which one is your bad knee, and I was like, I don't have a bad knee. That was a one that I cleared up pretty fast. Or will I be careful of that knee? We were doing jiu-jitsu, and I said, no, it's 100% now. I will take care of it myself. Obviously, you still have to be smart about it, but making sure that the words that you're putting out there are important too. Another lesson along the same line of language, it's a big year for language, I feel, is don't be afraid to speak to your body. Too often, and people who are listening to this who have chronic injuries are probably aware of this, too often we speak down to our body and we speak against it and we abuse it. It's unbeknownst to ourselves, we just knock it all the time. And if you do this, how do you expect it to work in your favour? If we know that the mind and the body, or if we feel or if we think, and we kind of are getting an understanding of this now with the research that's coming out, and I do have a podcast that's coming out soon on this as well with Dr. Aura Goldman, and I will put it out soon. But if we understand that the mind and the body are actually of the same thing, and that the body impacts the mind and the mind impacts the body, why do we feel we can treat them separately, talk negatively against the body, and still expect it to work positively for us? So one big thing for me was starting to speak positively towards it, starting to negotiate with it. As trainings went on this year, and as I was saying, I was refining everything. I knew what the warm-up was going to be. I knew what I had to do in the warm-up. I knew how much time I had to take in it. I knew what to do that day, the day before it, and the day before it, and the day after it. So I was really refining everything. And as the trainings went on, I would take the time to go to the side. During the warm-up, I would start to ask my body to work with me. I'd say, I know I can get through this. I'm feeling strong. I'm feeling fast. I'm feeling mobile. I'm feeling ready. And then I'd say things like, it's actually feeling really stable there. Oh, I have good power in that jump. I can stop really sharp. And I'd say that all I need is just to get through this next hour and we can recover then. I was literally having a conversation with my body in the corner. If people heard me probably sound like a lunatic. But it did work. And I would say to you to try this. If you're dealing with an injury, a long-term injury, I would love if you could try this. Just try speak a little bit more positively to your body. And you'd be surprised with how well this can work. Question number 4. What do you wish you would have done more of this year? Okay, what was something you did that you enjoyed, but you didn't get enough experience of? Is there a habit, behavior you feel you should have been more consistent with? This one is going to be obvious. Well, some of them are going to be obvious. Well, one of them anyway is jiu-jitsu and boxing. I felt like this year I wasn't able to keep it all going. I probably jerked my knee in the boxing, and after I did that, it caused a fear to kick off, and reality kind of set in for me a small bit that I needed to do more. I went back boxing a couple of weeks after the injury itself. Probably could have given it a bit more time, but I had to get back in at some stage. And I got back into jiu-jitsu in Brazil and I enjoyed it. But when I got back to Ireland, it was challenging to keep it up just because my priorities were changing. And it was difficult to keep them both going because it was taking a lot out of the knee, to be honest. And I did love getting back doing a bit of coaching at the club. So I look in the next couple of years, my own club, I would love to try get back and do a bit of coaching with the boxing there as well. The podcast was something I felt like I needed to do more of, and I just didn't do as much of it this year because I was doing so much other stuff. But I will be getting more with that next year, and I do have big plans for it. Okay, last couple then. My own rehab. I was definitely less structured this year with my own rehab, and I was hitting the gym consistently, but I probably wasn't doing the more specific stuff. That's definitely something that I wish I had done more of. The actual rehab of my knee probably wasn't as good as I would have liked in the gym specifically. If I was smarter at my load management plan, I would have been doing daily workouts around it, recovery. So if I was a bit more structured as I am with my clients, like if I had the same structure I have with my clients, I would have been 100%. But when I look back on it now, probably getting another coach in place for that would have been very helpful to just say, here, you just take over the rehab so I don't have to think about it, and then I would just add on and do extra around that. That'd be something that I think would have probably been a bit more helpful for me in that case, because you can do your own rehab and you understand it, but you can let yourself off sometimes. So it's better, I feel, to get someone else to do that for you in a lot of cases, which is a perfect plug. If you need help with anything, any chronic injury or any issue, you can let me know and I can see if I can help you out with that. That's a shameless one, but it just worked in there, so I said I couldn't leave it. Okay, question 5. What's something you want to do less of next year? In the year, I feel football really took over this year and the rehab around it. Small bit of work, I think, that needs to be improved. When I was in Brazil, I felt like I probably should have got to more places in Brazil, but there was a trade-off here that I did need to prioritise work and building the back pain back to exercise program, which is launching again in the next week. So building that was a priority for me, and obviously because of that it did take a bit more of my time, so I think getting around would have been nicer, but I just didn't have the same opportunity. On reflection, why did you prioritize something higher than it should have been? On reflection, work while in Brazil. Oh yeah, because I had to be proactive. It was more important to get that up and going again, and yeah, I just needed to make, if I was doing it in future, what I would do is I would actually make plans 3 to 4 weeks out instead, where I'd look and say, okay, in 4 weeks time I'm going to do this, so I'm going to work up to it. I'm going to do work up to that point. I'm the worst for doing that, for actually making plans. I go with the flow a lot, which obviously you can do nothing if you go with the flow too much. They were the main ones, really. I think the other one then was staying. I watched a lot of UFC this year because it aligned with the work that I was doing. Social media scrolling, as always, something that everyone needs to, I think, reduce over time. And then solitude to a point. I do like solitude, so I can't knock that too much. When I look at last year's, just because I think it'd be important to say this, what's something you want to do less of next year? When I look at my 2023 reflections, solitude was a big one. Impacted my ability to experience the city of Buenos Aires and Argentina because I probably spent too much time alone. And jiu-jitsu, because it wasn't higher than it should have been, but it was definitely something that I did a lot to the detriment of work at some stages. So it's funny that I say that jiu-jitsu, then I took this year kind of as like I did less jiu-jitsu because of the injury specifically, and then say next year I would like to actually get back in and do a bit more jiu-jitsu again because I love it, so I need to do it again. Okay, moving around, too much routine. All of those were my things last year. Question 6, what was your biggest success this year? I felt I had a good year overall. Getting back to football after the ACL tear with no surgery was pretty nice. Winning the championship then on top of that was a little bit of cherry on top, I think was good. Finding new friends, integrating myself into new places and getting a good stab at the Portuguese language, I think was a nice one for me as well. When I think about it a couple of years ago, and I say this in my last reflections one, is I always struggled with languages in school. I could never learn. I did French, really, to be honest. That's probably the problem, is that I just did languages that I wasn't interested in, and I had no experience in using them in other places when I was growing up. So I felt like I couldn't learn languages. And in the last 2 years, I could say that I'm probably some way conversational in Spanish and probably some way conversational in Portuguese as well, which is a nice one for myself, because just proving that if you do put in the work, you can improve on these things. Creating a new documentary, which I'm excited to share, and then ability to bounce back and set up, and ability to stabilize when the ship is rocky. That's in relation to over the summer when things were really up and down, and try to stabilize the ship. And what I mean by that is stabilize mentally, just make sure that I can keep focused and keep pushing on. What's a moment that you failed this year? Feel like I could have done more with a lot of different things, I guess. Had gotten very negative about my injury, and I feel that was something that I should have done better. Let a sense of my control cause anxiety in some cases, where I think I was talking to Kelly Fennell about this on a podcast, where after the loss of my friend, I definitely started trying to control everything around me. And until that was only really at the start of this year that I figured out that I was doing that, when I had moved from Argentina to Brazil. So that was one that was nice to really see how it can affect you, and it can cause a lot of anxiety and can cause a lot of panic if you do try to control things that you cannot control. So that was a nice one to learn and to be able to change then as well. But it was something that at times it was a small bit overwhelming, I would say. Okay, other one. Here's actually an interesting one. Trying to do too much with the back pain back to exercise group. Trying to do everything for everyone in it, instead of saying, okay, this is actually the real focus, and saying, okay, we have 6 weeks here. This is what we're going to focus. We're going to focus on implementing a new mindset of things that you can work on. This is exactly how you do that. These are the exercises that will get you up to the point, and then this is what you can do after it. Like if I was breaking it down, that's what I'm doing now, and that's what we're doing in the next course when it releases, which is from now, it's going to be next week. It's on the 6th of January for anyone who's listening to this podcast. There's going to be a hyper focus around nailing down the mindset and the triggers around it, and understanding your own system, and then implementing the strategies and tactics to overcome that, as well as get you back to exercise and to understand the flare-ups better, and then making sure that you get back to exercise and you're doing exercise at your own level, to the level that you want, and you know how to progress it over time, because it's 6 weeks. That's the thing. You can make a lot of change in 6 weeks, but the stuff that you learn in the 6 weeks, you will use for the rest of your life. And I think a big lesson this year as well is guys who I was working with earlier in the year reaching out to me at the end of the year and saying that, like, the tactics that you have taught me and the mindset and the strategies have had a huge impact on my life. And they were saying that they are still able to apply them right now, even 12 months after. So I would love to check in next year again, just to make sure that everything is going well. But yeah, so that was a really proud moment this year as well, was guys reaching out to me, girls from earlier in the year, and saying that they're still applying that and it's still working for them. Which, to be honest, is exactly why I do it. So I couldn't, I think that's really nice. So yeah, as I said, back pain, back to exercise is going to be more focused. It is starting next week and I'm looking forward to kicking it off. The last 2 questions. Question number 8. What is something you want to learn next year? From a business aspect, that's probably the first one that pops to mind. I think the side of efficiency in systems, and I think I can apply this to all aspects of life as well, where you just, if you're going to be doing something repeatedly, you may as well have a good system to do it. Whether that's training, whether that's business, whether that's, as I said, planning events 3 to 4 weeks out, just getting those in place. Networking is another nice one. I think going to Elevate Fit Fest was an enjoyable experience because I met really cool people there and got their experience on different things. We're jumping on their podcasts, so networking was a huge one. I really enjoyed it. Always looking for that. If anyone's interested, just reach out. I'd love to chat to you, and through Instagram or wherever. And then I think continuing my education. One thing I want to look at now is, because I've been arguing for the last couple of years that too many people focus on the biomechanical way too much, and we need to understand the other aspects before we can really make change to anything. I want to also dip my toes as well in the direction against what I have been preaching, okay? Because I think it's important to go over and back. So in the next year, I'm going to lean back into that as much, because I think the only way that you can really improve is you improve on one, you come back, you improve on the other, and you kind of keep going over and back as well. We're always just trying to get better. We're always trying to improve, and I think that's one way I can really improve as well in the next year. I also really want to get good at snowboarding in the new year. That's a random one, but there it is. Improve my jiu-jitsu game and implement the idea of seasons more. That's something that I talked about last year, and it's something that I want to improve this year. Okay, let's look at what I had said last year on last year's reflections. I said I wanted to continue to improve the back pain course, which I was lucky. I did. I think I can tick that one off. To use the idea of seasons better. That's funny. A work season versus a relaxing season. I did use that better this year. When I had moved back from Brazil over Christmas, when I was in Saudi, I could see myself using it more. And now that I know what the next year is looking like ahead, I can get better at that. Last year I said I want to become fluid in Portuguese. So that was good. I was able to get that in. And I said continue to improve on striking and BJJ. Obviously, big obstacle in the way there after tearing the ACL. So I did improve on the striking. Jiu-Jitsu I improved as well, but not to the standard that I kind of set for myself. Now, question number 9. The very last one. The simplest. What is your way to refuel? For me, I think it's taking time to myself. I think it's making sure I get good sleep, training, working on some form of a skill. I think that's a nice one. Spending time with friends, studying, and one that I picked up on this year that I really enjoy doing is studying fights. I guess coming from a boxing background, going into jiu-jitsu, coming from a combat background, really enjoy the idea of studying the strategy of fighters and looking at why they implement things in certain ways. I just think that it's extremely high risk. It's the consequences are there, but if you can implement a strategy and you can get a result, it's very pleasing in you watching those fights. So that's something that I think helps me to refuel as well. So last one that I want to finish on then, that's everything really. That's kind of the end of the podcast. I hope that was able to help people out. I guess I'm going to touch on my philosophy and how that has changed over the year. And I just have 5 or 6 points here, and I hopefully be able to encapsulate everything that I talked about in the podcast into that. Really, I think that understanding load versus tolerance is huge. Understanding what you're able to do, what the body's able to do, the signs it gives you before, and then saying, okay, your tolerance might be dropping on a certain day because you slept poorly the night before. As I said, I might be able to do a 60-minute training session with football on a Tuesday, but then if we train again on a Thursday, I might not be able to do that 60 minutes again. I might have to, even though I feel good, I might have to drop it back a little bit and do something else for the last 10 minutes. Okay, so that was a big learning. The impact of social support, really important. I noticed that with the clients that I work with, and that's why community is such a big thing in the back pain, back to exercise group, is that we're trying to push it so that everyone's going through the same issues, and just understanding that, okay, we can lean on each other here. That's a big one, I think, is social support, and making sure that your social structures are in place for that. And I was very happy that in Brazil I was able to have a nice community around me, and the same thing in Ireland as well. I guess how pain builds within the body, that's looking at that was like reading into a lot of trauma over the years, like books around trauma and understanding trauma better. You can see how pain can also be associated with that, because of like they look at trauma and how it comes out in like panic and anxiety, but you can kind of tie that back to pain with the same buildup of energy that needs to be offloaded somewhere. The pain is there, you're feeling it more, so you need to do something to offload that, and which is, I will talk about more, what the body's capable of. You put it into any situation, you use the stress and adaptation principle, you give it time to recover, you'd be very surprised what it can do. Last one then, or last two, I guess, is speak to your body. Make friends with it. Don't be afraid to talk to it. Talk it through things, even when it's not working like it should be for you. Be positive. Keep a positive outlook, and you will get to where you want to get to. It will take time, but you will get there. And I think the last one then is really having a better understanding of who I can help. Who I can help with my business, who I can help with my courses, and in general. And a lot of that is like people who have been dealing with their chronic injuries. Back pain is obviously a big focus of mine at the moment for people, but any type of chronic injury, ones that fear injury, ones that have a lot of fear around getting a flare up, what pain means, and how when kind of pain takes over your thoughts and it becomes so ingrained that it's all you're thinking about. I've been helping a lot of people overcome that, and I'm helping a lot of people get back into exercise, get back into activities that they love, and build up in activities that they are in. And yeah, that's from the year gone by, that's the people that I really feel that I've had a big impact on over the last year. But that's all from me. That's all from me today. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. They are my reflections on the year. Definitely a longer podcast than usual, but I had to cover a lot there, and I had to cover it in a lot of different ways. And I will do more podcasts on the ACL and that. If there's any little point in this podcast that you picked up on that you'd like me to expand on, I would love to hear it. Reach out to me on Instagram at RobbieCassidy_ RobbieCassidy, or you can email me at info@themobilitytutor.com. But for now, if you enjoyed this podcast, I would love if you could rate it on the top in Spotify. You just scroll all the way up to the top. I'd love if you give it a 5-star rating. I'm looking to get up to 1,000 5-star rating. 5-star ratings on Spotify and iTunes. I'm quite a bit off it right now, but with time, hopefully we'll get there. And lastly, the last two things, if anyone needs help with anything, shoot me a message. I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. We are kicking off the Back Pain Back to Exercise group on January 6th. So that is next Monday. If you know anyone, or if you yourself are interested in it, check out the link in my bio on Instagram, and I'll drop a link in the description of this podcast, which will bring you to the page to get you signed up to join the group. And on that then we'll be having group calls. We'll have the program there. You'll have all the education, a lot of the stuff that I had learned about. I'm making new videos for that, rehashing it all. So a lot of the stuff that I talked about in this podcast, I will be including in that program as well. And that's going to be kicking off next week. So hit the link in my description of this podcast to get that. Thank you all for listening. Chat to you all at the same time next week.